it like it is, bringing the community together and working for justice. Attorney Travis McConnell talks politics, trending news, and how you can make a difference. You're listening to We Trust Travis. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarina Fazan, a journalist, producer, and the host of the We Trust Travis podcast. I am here with Travis McConnell, a personal injury attorney with a huge passion for the community, and we thank you for joining us for this episode. So let's get to it. Travis, nice to see you.
You as well.
Travis, though, today you're going to share a story with us, a very emotional story about someone you cared about very much, named Mary Hoffer.
Yeah, so Mary was a paralegal that worked for me, is how I initially met her, and we became really close friends, and she was killed, and it had a big impact on my life, and it was something that I shared with you, and you thought it'd be good to talk about and be vulnerable with people, share the impact it's had on my life. So what would you like to know?
Well, we are so sorry for your loss, and on this episode, we're going to talk about how sadly that did happen to Mary and bring up awareness of domestic violence.
Yeah.
So take us back. When did you first meet Mary? You said she was one of your paralegals. How long ago was that? And was that when you lived in Florida, or did you meet her in Indiana? I know you practice law in both states.
Yeah, it was in Indiana, and it was several years ago. It was, I want to say like 3 or 4 years ago, because she was killed about a year ago.
So it really hasn't been that long.
No, she had worked for me. I knew her for 2-3 years before it happened. So,
how old was she, approximately?
She was a little older than I am. She was, I think, not quite 40, or maybe right around there.
So was she a single mom, or, had she just entered the dating world, or just tell us about her?
Yeah, she was just, she had a boyfriend at the time that I initially met her, and they had been together for quite some time, and she was an awesome person. She was a nurse before she worked for me, an RN, and she'd gotten into a little bit of trouble, and I was helping her out, and she ended up surrendering her nursing license and coming to working with me. And I
want to point out, like when you said that she got into a little trouble and she had to surrender her nursing license, we all deserve a second chance. Things, sadly, right, happen in life. We look back and we think, oh my gosh, but we deserve a second chance. So you gave Mary that second chance.
I did. So she struggled with opioid addiction, is what she struggled with. And so she got caught with some drugs and lost her job. And I don't think she had to surrender the license completely. She ended up working out a deal with the licensing authority somehow. But she got in trouble, and that's why she was left the field and realized that she needed to get out of the field to get away from the temptation, as it were. And so when I first interviewed her, what was the big thing to me is that she was honest and candid about it. So at the end of the interview, I just asked her, well, is there anything else I need to know about, open-ended? I looked up her history, and I saw that she had one. And so she came right out with it.
And that's really interesting because she may not have known, since you are a lawyer and you have that research background, you would know. You think that we all would research, who we're interviewing or when we go out to do something, but this isn't automatic for you to be a researcher. So you already knew some of her background.
I knew the stuff that was publicly available, yeah. So, and then, which isn't that much. I think there was, but it was like a charge for possession of a syringe or something like that. That's what it was. But yeah, she ended up telling me more about it and just came right out with it, and explained that's part of why she was getting out of the nursing field, if not full time, at least taking a break to put some distance there to not have the temptation. And we ended up talking about it extensively, and set up a whole plan. I'd love to help you with it and give you a second chance. And as long as you're honest, my big thing is honesty, and she was always honest. and forthright. And she had struggles, but we worked it through, and we ended up becoming really close friends. She was a great paralegal. She was both one of my best and my worst because of the struggles. When she was having a downtime, that would be the worst. But the other times, having a nurse on staff is great for a personal injury lawyer. Obviously, she was great at summarizing medical records, going through stuff like that, being able to help clients. She actually saved one of our clients' lives, literally. That's a fun story. But
Yeah, no, I was going to tell you though, how did she save the client's life?
So we had a client who had a fall and at a facility in Indiana, and had a case, and she was doing poorly, and Mary just kind of she had this way of helping people. She was a volunteer for the Red Cross and with her nursing degree, and she was just one of the nicest people you've ever met, and lots of people knew her, and everybody had nothing but good things to say about her. And so this client hadn't reached out for quite some time, and I don't know what it was, if it was just a sense from the universe or what it was, but Mary just said, there's something, she's not answering the call, she's not responding, I'm just going to swing by her house and check on her. And so she swung by her house and checked on her, and she found her on the floor in a bad state, and ended up having to take her to the ER. And the ER basically said, if we hadn't gotten her, she probably could have died, because I forget exactly what the condition was that
What
she
a
had.
caring person though in Mary, to actually not just to take that extra step to go to this person's home.
Yeah, and it was funny because she asked me, I'm like, yeah, if you think you need to go, go. Like, yeah, we do that, so go. We're there for people. So,
Well, I want to go back to when you initially interviewed Mary. So even before bringing her in, you must have seen this history of hers. What had you bring her in the first place? Because a lot of people may have said, well, she's had some, some problems. I'm just not going to deal with it, which I can understand that too. But why did you want to bring her in the first place?
to me, the big thing was the honesty, and that she was honest about it. And I think everybody deserves a second chance. I think, people deserve some grace. Maybe it comes from my faith. I'm a Christian. I feel like everybody deserves that second chance. I definitely had one. Right? We all make mistakes, but I think we can all subscribe to that, no matter whatever faith we share. But yeah, I think the big thing was just she wanted the help, and I could provide it, and that's part of my personality, is I like to help people.
Well, that's why we trust Travis. Yeah, that's why we trust Travis. So Mary becomes a wonderful employee. Also, and I know you said that there was the ups and downs, but she saved someone's life. She also is a friend, that you're giving a second chance to. So then what happened?
So she ended up moving away from Indiana, and she decided to move to Washington. And she had broken up with her former boyfriend and met a different guy, and he ended up moving out there with her.
And this is Washington State, because a lot of times
Correct.
when you say Washington, some people think DC, but we're talking Washington State.
They moved to Tacoma, I believe it was.
And that's my home state, so I'm very
Yeah.
familiar with Tacoma. Mm-hmm.
So they moved out there, and she moved initially, and then he kind of followed her out there. And ultimately, there were ups and downs, and he didn't do well with alcohol, and there was some abuse going on. And we would talk about it on the phone. We stayed close, and she would still kind of help out with stuff. If I needed something summarized, I could email it, and she could summarize it and send it back, and kind of moonlight that way, even though she wasn't in the office. But yeah.
As her friend, were you concerned about her
Yes.
during the time when she was calling? And also, as a lawyer, I think that you have a heightened sense of awareness with people. So as she was calling you, what were you thinking at the time?
And we talked about that. You need to get away from him. You need to break up. This is not good. Are there guns in the house? Are there knives? You need to, make sure there's not. And, don't be stupid. While she worked with me, we would actually help people that were victims of domestic violence ourselves. Both she and I had taken people to the local domestic violence sexual assault center to get them help that needed help. It's something that we both kind of had a passion for, just again helping people. And I actually was on the local shelters board for a while. I was the vice president and then president. And so yeah, and Mary and I helped other people get help, and so she knew what she needed to do. But I think when you're in the middle of it yourself, your judgment gets impaired. So we had talked on the phone, hey, this is bad. Where this is headed potentially, and
Was she scared?
She's not the type of person that got scared.
She knew that it was not a good situation and a good, healthy situation. But you're right. When you are in love or you feel that you are in love, you just cannot see clearly. As a journalist, I have seen so many of the most sane people go insane, in fact, because they're blinded by the love. So, but
It wasn't even so much that. I think that's definitely part of it. But it was more of she was like such a strong, independent type person, where she would have thought like, yeah, this is bad, but I'll take care of it. Like if something happens, I'll kick his ass or something.
I've got it.
That
I've
sort
got
of
it.
thing.
Yeah. Well, when I made that love,
She probably had a plan,
mhm.
but it didn't go the way that it would have, because basically how it happened is they were out at the bar and they came home drunk, and then he killed her and killed himself. So
That's so sad.
and so like she wasn't able to defend herself because they were both drunk. So yeah,
That's so sad. Do you know the specifics of?
I do, unfortunately, which was.
And if you don't want to talk
it's a
about
blessing and a curse, I suppose. So I knew a lot of the details. So she was telling me some of the the lead up to it, but like about a week or two before the murder, she had sent me a text, as well as I think two other people, about he threatened to kill me. That may be a slight paraphrase. And she's like, don't freak out. I just want somebody else to have this just in case, which ended up being eerily predictive. So I ended up having to give that to the Tacoma law enforcement. And the family ended up contacting me as well, since I was the lawyer, to kind of help with things. So I know all the details as far as what happened and all those sorts of things. I didn't go out there afterwards. Some of the other friends and family did, and they got to see the actual aftermath, which would probably have been even worse. But so basically they were out of the bar. They left the bar, came home, and sometime that early morning, she was stabbed multiple times, choked, and he took his own life with a gun and shot his head off. So
heartbreaking, just heart-wrenching. So with that happening, I can only imagine how much that has changed your life.
Yeah, I mean, a big thing, I blamed myself for a real long time. I was basically depressed for months, 3-4 months, and was blaming myself for a lot of it, because I knew, like, I got that text message, and I was worried about the fact that, like, did we ever connect after that text message? And was avoiding looking back at my phone records to verify if I had or hadn't. I ended up going to counseling. Highly recommend counseling to folks. It's not overrated, and don't be too tough for one of those people that thinks, you don't need it. Everybody could use it. Even if you don't think you have issues, it's good to have somebody to talk things through. But so I ended up going to a counselor, and the counselor's like, you got to go back and look. That way, at least you know what the answer is, and then you can deal with it. And so I went back and looked, and we never actually connected. But like, I had made multiple calls during times that she would have been available to talk. She just didn't answer the phone, which made me feel kind of nice. I was like, okay, well, I did my part. It's just she didn't answer. But then the fun extra wrinkle that we got looking at the phone records is she actually probably called me at the time that it was happening.
Oh,
So
I'm
there
so
was
sorry.
a call right around the timeline of when everything had happened, and like she was likely, like I was probably her last call, sort of thing. That was like one of those 1-minute calls, and I didn't have a voicemail, so it was probably like she started to dial and he threw the phone or something like that.
So to live with that as well.
So I got that answer, and then I got extra that.
Did the counselor help
yeah.
with that?
Yeah, extremely. So it's one of those things where you look back and like, so I blame myself for like not going out there, not doing more. You could have done all these things, and it wouldn't have mattered if I'd gone out there or not anyway. Mary was such that strong, stubborn person. It wouldn't have mattered. She was going to do what she was going to do anyway. Yeah. So.
And honestly, again, and I will reiterate and I'm not a counselor, and I don't have a degree in counseling, but of course you cannot, blame yourself.
Right.
What?
But I save people as a profession.
Yes, right. You save people as a profession.
I like to help people. And
right.
So I felt like I had failed her. That's what I think what it was. And for like the first time in my life, I had this like colossal failure that I'd never really had to deal with before. There's like small failures here and there along the way, or you lose a case, although that doesn't happen terribly often, knock on wood. Mm-hmm. But it was just like for the first time in my life, I felt like a real failure.
How are you living with it now? I didn't realize it had only been a year. I thought it had been a little bit longer. So it really did not happen too long ago.
It's either a year or 2 years. I'm trying to. I'd have to get out a calendar and look probably.
But honestly, when tragic things happen like this, it is hard to keep the dates in order. Like you think, oh gosh, was it a year ago? Was it 2 years ago? Because I think
when it's 2020, the year of like 50 years, right?
Yes, right. And we block out, I feel, traumatizing events or the memories of some of those traumatizing events. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I know it's changed you. Like how are you dealing with it now?
Yeah. So a big thing is it just made me realize, the priorities and like what matters. So I used to be a real workaholic, and I still am. It's my personality tendency. I love my job. I have a huge passion for what I do. I've got justice tattooed on my arm, for crying out loud. But
I did notice that. I wanted to talk to you about that.
So I realized, like, yes, that's important, but like make time for family, make time for friends, be more intentional in the relationship type of things. And so I make a point to, leave the office unless I'm in a trial or something like that. That there's a real exception at like 4:00 and get home, be with the wife and kids and all those sorts of things, and make a point to like really keep the priorities in line, be more relational, do more on those levels, I guess. Yeah.
It can sadly be an eye opener to life.
Yeah.
After with this horrible loss. What about domestic violence awareness, though? Talk to me about that. I mean, talk to me about, you are already passionate about raising awareness. But talk about this issue.
So that started probably a year or two before I knew Mary, even, or right around the same time, maybe. I don't remember the timeline, but the Beeman Home is the local domestic violence and sexual assault outreach and shelter in Warsaw. And the former executive director invited me to consider being on their board. And we got to know more and more about it. And it was always something that, like, being an attorney, I would get clients sometimes that would tell lawyers things that they don't tell other people. Especially when you have those close relationships with them, which I like to do and really get to know people. So you get people that tell you stories a lot. And even back then, like, I would talk with people about things, but then, like, having joined the board and learned about all the different resources, and the more and more you learn about it, the more better equipped you are to help people. And so I would, be able to talk with people more substantially. And then ultimately I knew, like, I may know this a little bit, but like, there's this great resource over here in our town, which is amazing. And if I could just get these people to connect over here, and so often they won't. And at first it was like, hey, you should call here. Hey, you should call here. Or you should go there. And then I realized people weren't going because there's like that barrier. And so then, they didn't want to go by themselves. So then I realized actually what's better is I'll take you there. And so I started, I'll go with you, and help people that way. So, and another thing that, learned about is, I don't know about the state of Florida, but the state of Indiana, I'm pretty sure it's a nationwide thing. Domestic violence victims are able to get out of leases if they're a domestic violence victim, because otherwise they can't get trapped with their abusers. And so I've helped a few people with that, where like they were victims and they're like, I can't leave because the landlord's going to sue me. And so you actually don't have to worry about that. We can send a letter to your landlord and explain the situation.
Is that hard to prove, though? Because I know there's a lot of victims out there. You hear it all the time where they won't go to court, because they're so afraid. So from a legal standpoint, and I know you can speak, for in regards to the state of Indiana, is that hard to prove?
The part with the lease, no. You just have to have the report showing like where you went to the facility, or that there was a police report to show like here it is, and to give that like this is happening, and that's all that's required for the lease according to the law. As far as proving the cases and prevailing against your perpetrators, your abusers, yeah, that's hard, and it's a tough thing for people to do because. So often abusers get away with it. A lot of that's because victims don't testify. But there's a reason why victims don't testify, and that's because a lot of times if they do, the person gets a slap on the wrist. Domestic violence is a misdemeanor. So, which the maximum is a year in jail for a misdemeanor, and usually for a first offense, you're not going to get a year in jail. You might get a month, if that. Sometimes less, sometimes more. Just depends. If you don't have a history, then you're not going to get a lot of time. You're going to score low or have low reasons to give a higher sentence. And so even if you go and you testify against this person on a first-time offense for a misdemeanor and you prevail, they're going to get right back out of jail real soon and come right back after you. And this is a big concern that victims have. So, and then there's the mental complications that come along with it, as far as like battered women syndrome, the battered person disease. That's a mental health thing. And I feel like domestic violence should be some sort of a higher punishment level, maybe some mandatory jail time potentially or something like that. The system is so broken that it's just sad to see. In Indiana, I take a little bit of criminal defense cases, and like I'm a part of that system now to a certain extent, where like I represent people who are accused of it, and there are some people that are accused that are not guilty, some people that are wrongly accused, but there's a large amount that you see they're accused, and then the one statement here goes away, and it's a completely different story because the witness won't cooperate, and they end up getting a slap on the wrist, or the case gets thrown out. So,
What do you think? What do you think we should be looking for in, with our friends or loved ones? Are there any key signs that we should be looking for that might raise awareness or raise the red flag that our loved one might be being abused?
There are. I probably need to pull them up. But if you go on to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, or NCADV, they've got all sorts of great resources on there where you can familiarize yourself with, like, here's the warning signs to look out for. Just talk to your friends. Talk about it. The big thing that happens in domestic violence situations is just like the abuser controls the person. It may not necessarily be physical. Most of it's not physical or not violent, but a lot of it is just a control to look out for. And so, if you see somebody who their partner is, controlling their schedule, controlling their time, not letting you talk to them, constantly taking their phone, things like that. If they're raising their voice, if their warning signs are, before they hit you, they're going to hit the table, they're going to hit the wall, they're going to hit other things. There's an escalation that things generally happen in. It doesn't immediately go to a murder-suicide. And there's all sorts of signs usually before it gets that far.
So what are you guys doing at your law firm? I know you do a lot of pro bono things, and we're actually going to have another podcast about how you spread kindness in your community. But as it relates to domestic violence, and especially your beloved friend, Mary Hoffer, what do you do to try to stop the curve?
We support the local shelter, and then we're here to help any victim that wants help. Another hard problem with the victims that need help is the statistics show that survivors will end up leaving and going back to their abuser on average 7 times before they finally leave permanently. And so I think it's frustrating for friends to, don't give up on your friends just because they're going back. It's harder to look at and like you will judge them, like, why do you keep going back? But stick with them and stand by them, So, I think just the main thing is just, continuing to partner, continuing to keep an ear out, continuing to help anybody that comes in our path. So,
I think you also brought up something else too that I would like to talk about a little bit more. Here you are, you're a successful attorney. You have your own podcast, happily married with 2 wonderful children. And I loved how you openly talked about it's okay to get counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit more and reassure people, give them the message and share that it's okay if you need help, that you can talk to somebody?
Yeah. So I actually called there's a program through the bar that's available to lawyers. It's called the Judges Lawyers Assistance Program. And so I called them to have accountability with it too. And so they're like, you need to get to counseling. And then they check in on you to hold you accountable. And again, it's just something to, there should be no fear of counseling. I think a lot of times people think that like they're going to go to counseling and they'll be worried that the counselor is going to pull something out of them and something deep there. But like you go to counseling with what you take to counseling. They don't know anything unless you tell them. So like if you're afraid they're going to get this thing out of you, like they're not going to get it out of you unless you tell them. So there are some people who go to counseling and it may not be overly successful because you only get out of it what you put into it. But it's immensely helpful for anybody to just be able to work through things with somebody who's impartial, who's got the training to be able to give you that. But basically, they help you be your best you is the best way I would explain it. Think of them more as a life coach than a counselor. And even if you don't think you have issues, we all got something that we can talk about and be better at. At least I do. I don't know. I'm not perfect, but maybe there's a few people out there.
No, I doubt it.
But there's always something that you can improve, and that's really what they're there for, is to help you be a better you, help you move past things. For people who have suffered from trauma, I highly recommend it. I recommend it with clients. I've seen the success from my clients before I saw it with myself. I had one client who was who we met on an earlier podcast. He was suicidal, wanted to cut his own leg off at one point, and he had multiple mental health treatments throughout his case, and now he's doing great and he's worked things through, and he didn't want to go at first. I think it's tougher sometimes for guys, or at least stereotypically, to be more vulnerable like that. But yeah, don't be afraid to go. And the big thing to me is just, if you want to be a better person, go to counseling.
So let me ask you, and this may not even be a fair question to ask, what about people that might say, oh my gosh, I don't know if my health insurance covers counseling, or I don't know if I could get counseling. Yeah. Do you think there is some type of counseling out there no matter what?
Unfortunately, in our society, maybe not. We live in a pay for medical treatment society, right? There's the whole national healthcare discussion and Medicare for all, those sorts of things. But yeah, fortunately, I was able to afford it. Some people may not be able to afford it as much. There's organizations that will help. There's a lot of places. Most of them are more faith-based. So if you're opposed to going to a faith-based place, then maybe you're not going to like that. But there's places that will do a sliding scale where you don't have to pay as much. A lot of those are faith-based, but there's probably some that aren't. Where you can go there and you may have to show them a pay stub to prove where your income is, but then they'll, instead of having to pay $100, maybe only have to pay $5 based on your income. And so I think there's there's a small number of those probably. And I think that number is probably pretty large, but depending on where you're at.
Well, as you have preached in your podcast, and very positively, that do your homework. Like, do your homework when you choose your attorney. If you do your homework, if you ask some simple questions, you could potentially get the answers that you need. And I think the same thing comes with counseling. You've just given us some great answers.
Well, I think that's the big thing where the counselor comes in is they're great at asking the questions. Like it's your answers, but they help you get to those answers by asking questions, maybe to get you where you're not going to be able to get on your own by coaching that way. And I know. You asked about health insurance. My health insurance, I know, covered mine. So if you have health insurance, just check with your insurance. But yeah.
But if you don't, there could be help out there. It's just a matter of asking the questions.
Right. And a lot of those places that have sliding scale, it'll be on their website that says, yeah, we take a sliding scale based on income. So do your work and talk about doing your homework on the counselors. It's hard to know if you're going to like your counselor or how well they're going to do. You can look at reviews, obviously, if they have them. But just because you have an unsuccessful experience with a counselor, I wouldn't say to rule off all counselors. Just try somebody else. You're not going to necessarily click with the first person you go to. Maybe, I was fortunate enough to do that, but I also knew the person that I went to. I actually went to law school, and she's a lawyer and counselor. And we weren't that close in law school, but I'm like, yeah, it was interesting. But if you don't like that one, then switch to a different one. You don't have to stay with somebody you don't like. There's lots of people out there, and it's a pretty personal thing. So,
well, we appreciate you sharing your personal story about Mary, because speaking about her and speaking about everything that she went through and what you went through after she sadly passed away, I'm sure could encourage people to get help.
Yeah, she was an amazing person. It was even the brief time that she was in Tacoma, there were people from Tacoma that came over to Indiana for her funeral because of how awesome of a person that she was.
Well, we dedicate this podcast then to Mary Hoffer.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
To learn more about Travis McConnell, head to travismclaw.com. Thank you for listening to We Trust Travis.